Tonight on KQED Newsroom, our political experts review the final presidential debate, and we discuss one of the most closely watched legislative races in California between South Bay State Senate candidates Dave Cortese and Ann Ravel. Also, college students are struggling with isolation and loneliness due to the pandemic. We hear about their experiences in this uncertain time. Welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Priya David Clemens. And now for KQED Newsroom's Election 2020 coverage. President Donald Trump and Vice President Joe Biden sparred in a more civil manner during their final presidential debate. President Trump argued Biden hadn't accomplished much during his decades as a politician, while Vice President Biden hit Trump on his coronavirus response and ongoing optimism about the course of the pandemic. Senate Republicans advanced Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination on Thursday, which will lead to a confirmation vote on Monday. In state news, a new poll from the Public Policy Institute of California indicates that 50% of likely voters oppose and 37% approve of Prop 16, which would reinstate affirmative action policies. Joining me now by Skype from San Francisco is KQED Politics and Government correspondent Marisa Lagos, and also joining by Skype from San Francisco is KQED Politics and Government reporter Guy Marzorati. Thank you both for joining us tonight. Guy, President Trump proved last night that he can display restraint and offer more of a coherent policy message. Is it likely to increase votes in his favor this late in the game, with just over a week left until Election Day?
Right. Well, I think the answer to that is entirely incumbent on his campaign's ability to take that slightly more coherent policy message than we heard in the first debate into specific areas. I'm thinking about the energy policy differences that emerged at the end of the debate between Biden and Trump. Trump seeming to pounce on the fact that Biden is promoting a transition away from reliance on fossil fuels. Now, can he take that message and drive it home specifically in a place like Pennsylvania? And also, can he drive it above issues that are clearly more on voters' minds, like coronavirus response and healthcare?
Marisa, are you expecting the unexpected to occur in the next few days, especially with President Trump behind the polls? Or do you think the two campaigns will be relatively quiet now? I mean, voting is already underway and in record numbers.
Right. We've had, I think, some 50 million Americans already cast their ballots. Look, Priya, I think that, like, never say never. 2016 taught us that. But the bottom line is that this has been a static race despite an unprecedented year, a global pandemic, something we haven't seen in a century, an economic meltdown. I mean, really, the bases have stayed with both men, and they're fighting over the scraps in the middle. So do I think Trump will try to continue to shake up this race? Probably. Do I think Biden is going to try to stay steady? That's been his strategy all along. I think one thing to watch is this meddling we're seeing from Iran, Russia, other foreign actors, how the Trump administration handles that and whether it does ramp up or whether it's just the disinformation that we're seeing domestically. I think those are really some challenging issues for both sides in these final days of the campaign.
Marisa, let's turn to the Senate Judiciary Committee. This week, the Democrats took a very unusual step of boycotting the vote to bring Amy Coney Barrett's nomination forward to the full Senate. What were they saying with that gesture?
I mean, the point was we're not going to participate in something we do not see as legitimate. But, you know, this has been on a fast track since the beginning. Democrats have very little power here. I think that, quite frankly, they made a more sort of potent political point during the hearings when they just over and over again really hammered on this case by the Trump administration seeking to overturn the Affordable Care Act and the fact that they feel like her past shows that she is very open to that argument. You know, were most people paying attention to the fact that Democrats didn't show up for this judiciary hearing? I don't think so.
And Guy, when it comes to the Senate Judiciary Committee, the ranking Democrat on that committee, California's senior senator Dianne Feinstein, has taken some criticism for thanking and hugging the ranking Republican on the committee, Lindsey Graham. And there have been state progressives here in California who have said they feel betrayed by her. And I want to read this quote from David Campos, a former San Francisco supervisor and the chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, who said Feinstein represents the past of San Francisco and California. It's not surprising that at a time we're facing a crisis, when we have a right-wing supremacist being rushed through the Supreme Court, she's not up to the task, and it's not because of her age, it's just because of who she is. Now, Campos wasn't speaking on behalf of the San Francisco Democratic Party, but he was expressing opinions and sentiments that are being echoed by other progressive leaders throughout the state. Do you see Feinstein serving out her full term?
Well, look, I think it's a lot more likely that we would see in a new Biden administration, perhaps Senator Feinstein stepping away from her leading role on the Senate Judiciary Committee. But frankly, I think Democrats should be thanking Dianne Feinstein for the subdued way in which these Supreme Court hearings played out. I think Republicans initially saw this as an opportunity to take the conversation away from the pandemic. We've seen Supreme Court hearings in the past really inflame partisan identities, drive people into their corners, versus an issue like the coronavirus in which there's widespread agreement and the president's failing to contain this. And I would say that because of the subdued way in which this played out, it really never emerged as a top issue in last night's debate and in recent weeks. I think in this case, progressive complaints about Dianne Feinstein are not going anywhere regardless of the results of the election. But in this specific case, I actually think that her moderation helped her party.
And Marisa, if we do see Biden and Harris win the White House, and if Feinstein does choose to retire, it puts Gavin Newsom in a very unusual position of being able to appoint 2 senators. Does that offer him some advantages?
Yeah, I mean, he gets to essentially anoint 2 ambitious California politicians to a very powerful post with no term limits. I think there's a double-edged sword to that, too. You're going to make some friends. You're probably going to make some enemies, too. Obviously, there is a long line of people who have been eyeing these seats. I mean, Kamala Harris jumped into the race so fast when Barbara Boxer retired that it really didn't leave an opportunity for anybody else within the establishment to get a toehold. So I think that, yes, this is something, I mean, it might be a little weird for Newsom, too. He might be wanting one of those seats himself. But, to Guy's point, I think that there's long been a feeling that Dianne Feinstein may not actually want to serve out this full term because of her age, because of where things are at. I think ultimately she's going to want to go on her terms, whether that is from the judiciary position or it's from the Senate entirely.
Guy, Joe Biden has now said that he would create a panel to study the possibility of adding Supreme Court justices if he wins the election. Talk us through how Republicans are responding to this possibility.
Look, Republicans are still unified in opposition to any kind of judicial reform like this. And Priya, as you know, on the political ladder of avoidance, forming a blue ribbon panel to discuss something is only a couple rings above not addressing the issue at all, which was Biden's previous strategy when it came to court packing. Ultimately, though, I don't think this is an issue that's driving people to the polls on either side. There's not a lot of evidence that this is emerging as a top issue. Even in last night's debate, it didn't really break through. So I think this is something that Democrats will continue to debate about into the next administration, but I don't think it's going to play a huge role on November 3rd.
All right, let's turn now to the Public Policy Institute of California, which has put out a new survey about some of the state propositions. Prop 16, which is the one that would reinstate affirmative action, currently doesn't have enough support to pass. It has about 30% of likely voters saying that they would support it. Marisa, why do you think that this proposition hasn't garnered more support?
It's such an interesting question, Priya. I mean, I do think some of it is just that everything is getting so overshadowed by the presidential race and our national politics. I also think this is fairly complicated. If you were not of voting age when Prop 209 passed, which banned affirmative action and which would, this would repeal that ballot measure, you may not have a very strong opinion on it. I think it's a real failure in some ways of supporters that they haven't done a better job kind of connecting this to the bigger racial justice conversation we're having. I talked to Mark Baldessari, who ran that poll. He did mention that support has ticked up. There's still a large group of voters that are undecided. The Yes campaign does have funding. The No side is virtually non-existent. So they have an opportunity here. I don't know that they're going to be able to get over the finish line, but it is one of those things where I think that they need to really make a clear, sort of connection between Black Lives Matter and the bigger conversation we're having around race and make the case for why this is going to help in that sort of broader push for civil rights.
Okay, Guy, let's talk about a race you've been covering in the South Bay. This is between Dave Cortese and Ann Ravel. What can you tell us about these 2 candidates and the state of this race? Because it's being very closely watched.
Right. This is a fascinating race, and I'm sure any viewer in San Jose knows with the torrents of ads and mailers, this has become an incredibly expensive campaign, the most expensive state legislative campaign in California. We're nearing $10 million in spending when you look at independent spending in the campaigns. And there are really a lot of key differences between these 2 Democrats on issues like housing. Cortese, who's a county supervisor, has been more pro-development. He's in favor of zoning reforms that would legalize housing in more areas in the state, as opposed to Ravel. And then, on some hotly contested propositions, Prop 15 to raise commercial property taxes to fund schools and local government. You have Cortese in support and Ravel in opposition. Prop 22 on Uber and Lyft and gig worker classification. You have Cortese opposing that and Ravel in favor. So I think it's the latest example of how there can be a lot of daylight between Democrats in the same party on these state and local issues.
Marisa, is it a similar case for another race that's shaping up with state senator and former San Francisco supervisor Scott Wiener and a progressive challenger who thinks that Scott Wiener is not progressive enough?
Yeah, except for I would say that this is one where personality plays a big role too. I mean, Scott Wiener is being attacked by Jackie Fielder, who's a very young rising star. I mean, she is amazing. I think if she doesn't win this race, she will be running for something else. But she's really been going after him from the left, talking a lot about climate change, trying to tie him to developers and sort of big business. The truth is, Scott Wiener is one of the most progressive senators in the state Senate. He comes from San Francisco. He has always been part of the more moderate sort of sector of our Democratic rainbow of politicians here in California. But he's a gay man. He has pushed hard for a lot of very progressive issues, and I think that this is one of those cases where there's just only so many seats, and sort of a combination of certain segments of the political world do not like Scott Wiener personally, and Fielder saw an opening on these issues like climate change that are of course very important to voters.
We have to take a look at Prop 22 as just the most expensive ballot measure in California history. So of course this ballot measure is the one that will decide whether Uber and Lyft and other companies can classify their employees as gig workers or if they are full-time employees. What is the latest on this? Where does this stand? Does it seem like it's going to pass? Guy, I'll throw it to you first.
Sure. I think, this is going to be a very close contest in this proposition. There's just an incredible amount of spending. Ultimately, I think voters are looking for signals on where drivers stand, and that's a hard question to ask because a lot of drivers do want the flexibility that these kind of independent contract rules provide. At the same time, a lot of drivers who use these apps as more full-time employment want the kind of benefits and security that they're not getting. I would encourage our viewers to check out the great reporting our colleague Sam Harnett has done on this and really the interesting and very controversial campaign tactics we've seen from Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash when it comes to kind of using these workers in the Yes campaign.
Marisa, the final 20 seconds here. Any last thoughts on Prop 22?
Well, just that the last poll at the end of September did show a wide number of voters still undecided. The Yes side, even though they've put almost $200 million into this campaign, have not reached that 50% threshold in that poll. I'll be watching next week to see new public opinion polling, but I think this is going to be a tight one despite how much money these companies are spending.
Marisa Lagos and Guy Marzorati, both with KQED. Thank you both.
Thanks, Priya.
Thanks so much.
Visit kqed.org/voter guide for a comprehensive look at all the state and local ballot measures, including summaries and arguments for and against them. Since the start of the pandemic, high school and college students have been faced with additional challenges, leading to higher levels of stress and anxiety. A survey of thousands of students at 9 campuses earlier this year found a prevalence of depression that's twice as high compared to last year. In addition, many college students are experiencing unprecedented loneliness and anxiety, which is leading to an increase in cases of depression. Social distancing restrictions due to the coronavirus have halted many traditional types of therapy, so researchers are testing new ways to help college students feel connected and less stressed. Joining me now by Skype from San Francisco is Danielle Ramo, the Senior Director of Research at Hope Lab, a nonprofit that creates digital tools such as apps and video games to improve the health and well-being of young people. And joining by Skype from Chicago is Will Coleman, a senior at Columbia College and an intern at Hope Lab. Thank you both for joining. Will, can you share with us some of the mental health challenges you've experienced this year, especially compared to pre-COVID days?
Yes, so I am currently a senior at Columbia College Chicago, and with having 3 years under my belt in college, I understand the stresses that already come in school. So depression can be involved, anxiety just on a regular basis, but adding a global pandemic on top of all of that can really raise the bar dramatically within all of those feelings. So me being way more anxious, depression creeping in, being that I'm behind a screen for 8 hours throughout the day and having minimum interaction of real life students. And that's one of the major parts about college is the fact that you can work with students from all around the country and working in a field that is passionate to you personally. So when things are shifted over to a computer screen, those feelings are just increased by so much, being that you can feel like you're isolated and you're by yourself and no one's really there with you, because that's what it really practically is, because classes are held over Zoom instead of it being in person.
And Danielle, Will has had at least the opportunity to have several years in college of more of a normal college experience. Freshmen are having a very different experience this year. What are your concerns about the cognitive development of Generation Z due to these restrictions?
It's fair to say that this year is unlike any previous year, frankly, in history. And Gen Z is really experiencing something unprecedented for themselves as well. As a clinical psychologist, I like to come with a frame of hope and resilience when I think about Generation Z, or those born after 1996. They carry with them an incredible amount of hope and resilience. Members of Gen Z are more racially and ethnically diverse than any previous generation, and they're on track to be the most well-educated generation yet. They're also digital natives who have no memory of a world before smartphones. And this makes technology a unique part of their developmental experience, both their brain and their social developmental experience. And there are, of course, perils and promises that come along with that. That being said, there are a lot of vulnerabilities that Gen Z is experiencing, some of which you reviewed in your intro, and the toll of COVID-19 is taking an adverse effect on Gen Z. So while Americans overall, on average, are not more lonely as a result of the pandemic, for example, Generation Z, or young adults today, are indeed saying that they're more lonely, more isolated, and experiencing more depression and anxiety.
Will, what are you hearing from your peers, from your friends, about how they're getting through this time?
It's a very rough time because, as you stated, this is such a different time of year. Everybody's dealing with it all at the same time. This is new for everybody. So just having somewhat of a community built, whether it's on social media or any other platform online, is a great way to get through these issues, because you are being able to communicate with other folks and students who are going through similar feelings as you. So just keeping an open dialogue and always keeping the conversation going and sharing and expressing our feelings with each other is a great way that we're able to get through these hard times.
Danielle, you've created an app called Nod through Hope Lab. Can you tell us what it does and how it is meant to help college students?
Sure. Hope Lab uses technology to build resilience and coping skills among young people, adolescents and young adults. And with Nod, we wanted to reduce the burden of the impact of loneliness on young people's well-being and create a sense of community, like Will was describing, outside of the app experience. Nod has three main features. First, it gives students ideas, which are prompts based on the science of social connection, that help students take small, achievable steps toward meeting new friends, going deeper with people that they start to have connections with in college. And the second feature of Nod is reflections. These are short in-app exercises that help students process the feelings that come with taking a chance in meeting new people, and reflecting that sometimes that goes well and wanting those feelings to sit longer, and sometimes it doesn't go so well, and wanting to help students reflect on that with a lens of self-compassion. And third, everything we do at Hope Lab is co-created directly with young people themselves. So we have sourced a number of testimonials directly from college students about the experience of meeting new people, making new friends, and connecting in college. And the idea here is to help other students realize that making new friends in college is not easy. It takes work, and it can be done with effort.
And Will, I see you nodding there. Tell us about your experience in finding Nod and how it has worked for you.
Yes, my process of finding Nod was through the Hope Lab platforms. I've been pretty connected with Hope Lab for the past 2 years. So when I saw that they were developing a platform to help college students get out of this rut of just poor emotions or negative emotions on their life, I was very, very intrigued. So I gave it a try, and through the platform, as Danielle expressed, there are so many elements to it that really are crafted and developed to help college students navigate these issues in their lives. So whether it's reflections or whether it's picking out a prompt that helps you get through your day just a bit better or increase those emotions that you're feeling, it's just overlaying. It's such a beautiful experience to be able to go through and share with other friends. My personal experience, I found that whenever I was feeling a certain way, I was able to navigate that feeling within the platform. And then I was given a bunch of different prompts so I can go throughout my day and, reduce those feelings of anxiety or loneliness. I was kind of skeptical at first about the app because I just didn't think, I've never used a self-help platform before, such as Nod, though after giving it a try, I can definitely say that using those prompts and just incorporating them into my everyday life has helped me so much when it came to those feelings.
And I do want to mention, you found out about Nod and you were using it before you became a Hope Lab intern, actually.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Can you talk us through maybe one of those exercises? What does it look like? What does a prompt do?
Yeah. So, for example, with everything being so different and school being 100% online for me, you can definitely feel lonely. So on the app, you can select the mood that you're feeling. So if I'm feeling lonely, for example, I would click feeling lonely. And then I am given a bunch of different prompts that are designed and crafted to help reduce that loneliness that I'm feeling in that certain time. So, for example, one of the prompts can say, set up a meeting with one of your college professors. So that was one of the first prompts that I've ever did off of the platform. So I set up a meeting with my professor through a time I was feeling very, very lonely. And, I wasn't really excited to set up a meeting with my professor because why would I want to talk to my professor outside of class time? But I was very happy I did follow that prompt. And throughout my meeting with him, I was given a ton of resources that my school had to offer for students that are also feeling lonely, and also a ton of tips, that was personal tips from him, such as, reach out to your classmates who have similar interests to you. And I was also given a bunch of different emails from classmates that I could talk to who shared similar interests with me, that he noticed that I would be really good friends with. So just following that prompt of reducing the loneliness really, really did help. And it helped me discover a prompt that I would probably have never done without, reviewing the app.
And so it sounds like it really motivates you to take action, which is different, Danielle, than what we're seeing in other social media platforms. This is definitely a different use of technology than, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or many of the other platforms that young people may be on. It seems like there's sort of this paradox here that you are working through a technology that so many people say can lead to feelings of social isolation, can lead to feelings of loneliness, can lead to screen fatigue, frankly, but you're using that in a new way. Can you talk to us about that paradox and how you have balanced that feeling and that sense of using technology?
Certainly. There are a lot of challenges around screen dependence and some risks that Gen Z face around bullying, screens contributing to isolation and social isolation. But at Hope Lab, we think about ways that technology can also build community and also increase resilience through building coping skills to help us do what we need to do to be happy, thrive, and live well. And that's what we've really tried to do with the Nod app. So one of the things you mentioned is social media, and Nod is different from social media in multiple ways. First, we encourage students to build social connections and communities outside the app itself. So it's not students talking to each other or engaging in some of the ideas that Will talked about through the app. They are just getting these ideas through the app, and then they're coming back to the app to process how that goes outside of the app. But frankly, with Nod, we were hoping that students would come when they needed strategies. We would be able to give them strategies that would feel achievable, possible, and maybe interesting, hopefully interesting to them. They would go out and try them and then come back to the app just briefly, reflect on it, and then eventually not need the app anymore. So whereas tools like social media are designed to be addictive, we had the opposite in mind with developing Nod. We hope that students who need Nod will use it for a little while and then will not need to use it anymore.
And Danielle, how can people access the app? Is it free? Where can students get this?
Students can get it on their campuses. Nod is being offered as an enterprise solution where colleges and universities can purchase a license to offer Nod to their students on campus for free.
Okay. Will, you're in your last semester of college and you're set to graduate in December, just a couple of months away. How has the pandemic impacted your vision for your future and your anxieties about it as well?
Yeah, I think this pandemic could have really destroyed a lot of college students when it comes to their mindset and their pursuit to continue to chase their dreams. Though I think the pandemic really created such a resilient effect upon all of Gen Z folks. The fact that we're not giving up and we're still pushing, we're still attending school, we're still chasing our dreams, we're still locking in internships just shows how resilient the generation of Gen Z is, and just continue to pursue those things that we truly do love. It could have been very, very easy for me to drop out of school and, just take a break until the pandemic rolled around. But instead, I kept going. And I just think that's what really made Gen Z so, so special.
Danielle, is Will's experience common to what you are hearing, this sense of resilience, or are more people feeling drowned by their anxiety?
Will reflected some vulnerabilities and also some resilience that we are indeed hearing from our Gen Z users. And in a research study we just conducted at Hope Lab, the vulnerability is that more Gen Z students are dropping out of college after the first year, citing mental health reasons being the main reason they're leaving, than any generation prior. And this was really concerning, and one of the reasons that we wanted to create NOD. In a trial that we just conducted at the University of Oregon with 221 first-year college students, we found that the students who were most vulnerable to experiencing these mental health problems, those who came into college with heightened depression and loneliness, did indeed benefit if they use NOD. They were less lonely, less depressed, they slept better, and they were more likely to say that they would stay in college after the first year if they use NOD compared to those who didn't. And we saw this as some real hope.
Danielle Ramo and Will Coleman, both with Hope Lab, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And you can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/kqed-newsroom. I'm Priya David Clemens. You can reach me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Priya D. Clemens. And now for an elevated look at something beautiful. After months of anticipation, the Sky Star observation wheel took its first spin in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park on Wednesday. The wheel was set for the park's 150th birthday celebration earlier this year, but the grand opening was delayed due to COVID-19. The 150-foot tall wheel holds 36 enclosed gondolas that give riders sweeping views from the city's financial district to Ocean Beach. From all of us here at KQED Newsroom, thanks for joining us. Good night.